Welcome back everyone. In this video we're going to be going through a response video that DawahOverDunya, it is DawahOverDunya, not Dunya over Dawah. He's made a response video to the very brief debate I had with Sneako when he came to Speaker's Corner and got his butt handed to him by a handful of Christians. Now this has set the Muslim missionary community online into a fury. People have rushed in to defend Sneako, to try to explain away why he didn't perform very well. You know, oh, he's a new Muslim, he didn't know what he was doing, he didn't know what he was talking about, he's only been a Muslim for a year, he's only been hanging out with Sheikh Uthman, Muhammad Hijab, Smile to Jannah, Ali Dawah. How could he have possibly known that their scripture has 10 different variants? How could he have known that? He's only been a Muslim for a year. Like, guys, you need to give this guy time. Like, come back in like, I don't know, 5 years or something. Maybe he'll figure it out then. And then there's the Warner. I am the Warner guy. He hangs out with him. He's a Dawah guy. Sneako literally has a ton of people who specialize in giving Dawah, who know this stuff because they study this stuff at his beck and call. And yet he claimed he still doesn't know that the Qur'an is not perfectly preserved. There's not just one Qur'an, there's actually 10. Guys, the fact that Sneako doesn't know this is evident to the fact that you guys hide things in your religion. And you're afraid that this is going viral and people are finding out. People are finding out that there is not just one Qur'an. There's actually at least 10. And before that, 7. And then even after the 10, 14, it gets more and more crazy the more you dig into this, because you realize, historically speaking, the ulama, the scholars, never had this understanding that there was a perfect preservation, but rather there was a kind of preservation. For those of you who aren't familiar with the discussion I had for Sneako, I'll link to it in the box down below. You can go check that out in your own time. It's fairly short. I think the conversation was only about 15 minutes, but it's basically me asking Sneako, hey, what do you think about the Quran and how it's preserved? He says it's preserved perfectly and that there is only one Quran. I then explained how that's not true. He said, well, I have no idea. I am the one who jumped in and basically just insulted me because that's all he has. I mean, yeah, if you were in a false religion and you were being called out, what else would you do? You just attack the guy, right? The chat I had with Sneako went viral. I think there's a Twitter post where it had over like 200,000 views, and it really upset a lot of Muslims, particularly those involved in Dawah, because in effect Sneako wasn't able to defend the Islamic position that the Quran is perfectly preserved, and that's kind of one of their big things. Now we know that this is false. Any of you who've been watching my channel have known for quite a while now that the Quran is definitely not perfectly preserved in any sense of the term. But for those of you who are new here, we'll go through some stuff, but let's see what DawahOverDunya has to say. I'm sure it's all rigorous argument and not just getting emotional and tired, should we say. Let's have a look.
So just for context, this is when Brother Sneako went to Speaker's Corner, and he encountered the missionaries. He encountered the typical regulars, the regular Christian missionaries of Speaker's Corner. A very very unique specimen, for lack of a better word. Yeah, nice. It's obviously, he's a new Muslim. He probably doesn't know who the hell he is. What do you call it? Obviously, Sneako's not aware of who these people are, or not very familiar, most likely. Hey, what's up? I'm a Christian. Nice to meet you. Yeah, bro, come on. Yeah, I just hate when people. I hate two-faced people. That's just. I really don't like two-faced people. But anyway.
So I was wondering what your perspective was about the preservation of the Bible and the Quran.
Right, the Quran is.
What he really means by that is, listen, I have some arguments against Islam. So some really bad arguments, uneducated arguments of an ignoramus that I'm interested in presenting you. And I know that you're a new Muslim, so you're probably not going to know the responses. So let's go. Yeah, I'm just translating for Chris here. You know what I'm saying? Just so we don't waste time.
Straight away, this DawahOverDunya guy, I don't know what's wrong with him, but he is upset. He is really upset. This whole review he does is very emotional. To be honest with you, I think the guy's triggered. I think the guy just doesn't know what to do with what's happening here. He's probably been asked by a lot of Muslims, hey, you need to review this. I don't understand. How is it that there's this Qur'an and there's 10 different Qur'ans, but there's still supposed to be one Qur'an. It's perfectly preserved. Please do a review on this. And this is when you can kind of tell, right? This is what happens. People get asked so much to do reviews that they have to because their community keeps asking them to. And this guy has a big channel, so he's probably had a lot of people messaging him saying, you need to talk about this, you need to talk about this. And he's like, oh gosh, do I really have to? Now I have to defend the perfect preservation of the Quran? Oh no, I hate that topic. They're going to talk about the Aruf that we have no idea what it is. The Qira'at, which, is a mess and has changed over time. So he does not want to talk about this topic. But now he has to, because this is a live stream and he's been asked to cover this topic by the faithful Ummah. And unfortunately, this has kind of brought out the worst in him. And now he's very emotional, very upset. A lot of insults. The guy just insults like all the time. Literally, you go through the like 5 minutes of the clip and he's like, Chris is this, Chris is an ignoramus, Chris is a... And he just goes through all this and it's brilliant, man. Which is weird because I've never met the guy. Like, I've never spoke to the guy. And yet he somehow thinks he knows what I think. Which is a sign that someone is a bit emotional, and they need to just take a chill pill, go have a little bit of a nap, and then come back later, and then we can have an actual good discussion. It couldn't even get in a few minutes before he starts making insults to my character, which is interesting because this is a very concise video. He could literally just go through this and just say, hey, here's what's wrong, here's the explanation, there we go. But instead, something has triggered him, and now he's being emotional and is trying to attack my character because he doesn't actually have any arguments. Muslims, if you have to listen to people who defend your religion and the way they do it is by attacking anyone who critiques it, keep in mind, by the way, I'm probably the most laid back person you're going to find who can critique the Quran in this kind of way, who can go into the Qira'at and the Aruf and explain things to you. When you've got these guys who immediately just go for the, hey, let's discredit this person, it's because they don't have answers for you. It's because they would much rather you remain ignorant. Let's keep watching. This will become kind of a running theme throughout this review.
All right.
Okay.
So if they're different, then there's not one Quran, there's 10 Qurans.
Okay.
So do you take that back? There's only one Quran?
That's the first time I've heard that.
Well, no, I said it to you, you accepted it, so I assume you know about it, right? You're not just taking my word for it.
What are the 10 versions? No, so there's different.
Look, I don't know if I can't really have a lot of respect for some people. Like, I mean, it's not that I don't want to, although to be fair for you, I don't. Because look, it's one thing to be here. Look, there's people out there who just don't know. Like, they genuinely just don't know. Like Sneako here, for example. Like, he's a new Muslim. Okay, this video is, by the way, from a month ago. Okay, or it was uploaded a month ago. Allah knows best when this discussion actually took place. But anyway, look, Sneako, he's a new Muslim. He doesn't know. He doesn't know. That's fine. That's fine. I mean, sure, inshallah, he'll learn these things and he'll, that's fine. A lot of people who are born and raised in Muslim families don't know what the Qur'an are, unfortunately. It's unfortunate. But anyway, like, it's one thing to not know. Okay, cool. It's another thing to pretend to know what you're talking about. Yeah. To pretend to know what you're talking about. Yeah. To, like, and not only that, but to have made an argument so many times, to have heard the response, to know the response, know the refutation, but still refuse to acknowledge it and still persist on making the argument again and again and again when the opportunity presents itself.
And again, he has to set up the scenario. So all he's doing at the moment is just attacking my character. That's all he's doing. And he's doing it, to be honest with you, from quite unstable... I don't know, he looks like he's triggered. He needs to calm down a little bit. This isn't the demeanor of someone who's confident in what they're saying. This is the demeanor of someone who has to rely on cheap psychological tricks to get his audience to accept what he's saying. So, for example, attacking the other person in any way to discredit them immediately before they've even finished making their argument. He's called into question already, we're a few minutes into this video, he's called into question my sincerity, he's called me two-faced, he's implied that I'm ignorant, and we haven't even got off the ground yet. This is how delicate this topic is, Muslims. If you think that this is a walk in the park for you, you're wrong. Just look at how this guy's acting. This guy looks like a nervous wreck. This guy looks like he has had about 10 Red Bulls, went on a live stream, panicked, and just decided to say the first thing that comes to his head when watching an incredibly short 15-ish minute clip. This is how I know you guys are finished. Dawah is done with. Islam is false, at least in the way that you understand it. Perfect preservation is a lie, and it's not true at all.
And I love it when Christian missionaries try to compare the qira'at of the Qur'an to different versions of the Bible. You want to know the biggest difference? One, Muslims are not arguing about the qira'at. As Muslims, we don't dispute the qira'at. We're not like debating with each other about which one is more accurate, which one's... we don't do that. We don't do that. We Muslims, we accept all of the authentic qira'at of the Qur'an.
And there we go. He's also brought up the whole tu quoque fallacy of saying, Let's talk about Christians. This is just the bread and butter of people who want to deflect. If I make a critique of your religion and you decide to respond to it and give a review, maybe you should address what I'm saying and not just say, but as a Christian, but Christians, but seriously, I get it. Sometimes I think that Muslims are obsessed with Christians because everything they do is in the context of Christianity. When you can't even answer basic questions without pointing to Christians, they're doing it because they want to try it and once again discredit me, right? But it's a tu quoque fallacy. It's whataboutism. Basic stuff.
Right? Do all Christians accept all Bibles? No. Chris here, he's an evangelical.
Wait, am I? Man, this guy knows more about me than me. He knows what church I go to. He knows what I believe. Man, maybe he's a long lost cousin or something because this guy claims to know so much about me. It's brilliant. I know nothing about him.
Which one of these is authentic? That's the main issue. It's not even just the issue of differences in content because the qira'at have different wording here and there. They do. The qira'at, and he brought this up. The qira'at, well, how would you believe in one Qur'an? But if there's 10 different qira'at with different wording, there's 10 qira'at. Number one, they very, 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 very rarely differ in wording. But I'll tell you what, no problem. Every now and then they do. They do.
Hey, congratulations, you've taken the first step into accepting that the Quran is not perfectly preserved. You have at least affirmed the obvious and self-evident truth to pretty much everyone except for people who've been lied to in the Ummah and scholars who just lie, that the different qira'at actually have different words in them that mean different things. Thank you very much. Brilliant stuff. Step 1. Let's see if we can get to step 3. But step 1 I'm happy with so far. Let's hold with that one.
The qira'at of the Quran are agreed upon to all be authentic and all to be revelations from God.
Oh, hello there. Okay. Historically, that's not true. It might be true today. There might be a broad consensus in Qur'an today. But historically, that was not true at all. In fact, the earlier you get to the time of Muhammad, the more you realize there are many, many, many readings, at least 25. According to Dr. Yasir Qadhi, he quotes an early Islamic scholar who acknowledges the existence of at least 25 different qira'ah that are in use in different mosques, being recited in prayer. 25. And you see, this is where they deceive you, because what they're trying to do is, this guy, DawahOverDunya, is trying to imply that, well, it's always been this way. There's always been 10. No, that's not true at all. In fact, the earlier you go to the time of Muhammad, the more you realize there was a ton, and there was a lot of arguing over which were accepted recitations and which were not accepted. They didn't even have a criteria as to how to define what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable. They had to come up with a criteria to figure out which qira'at they should accept and which they should reject, because they weren't able to know exactly which ones go back to Muhammad. If you knew which ones went back to Muhammad and there was an oral tradition that told you, you wouldn't need criteria. You would just know it. But they didn't know it. They argued about it, and hence it isn't perfectly preserved. To give an illustration here, how do you know that those 25 at a minimum different qira'at that were recited at a particular time in the early centuries after Muhammad's death, how do you know that those all weren't valid? You don't know that all those weren't valid. In fact, how do you even know that some weren't lost that were valid? Again, you have no metric or way of knowing it. You have to take it on faith. So we know that there was disagreement among what was acceptable Quran and what was not acceptable Quran in the early first few centuries of Islam. The fact that there has been multiple efforts throughout the centuries by different scholars to try and standardize these into an acceptable amount that everyone agrees on doesn't mean anything. By his same reasoning, I could just take one of the different canons of the church, maybe I'll take the Protestant one, and according to him, if I just somehow manage to remove the Orthodox canon, for example, then somehow I've just proven that there was never any argument? No, of course not. Even if the church came together and just agreed on one canon, that doesn't mean there was an argument and disagreement. There was, and we're aware of this. But Christians would rather preserve these different traditions so we can debate them, rather than try and destroy other traditions and to then lie about it post the fact and pretend that nothing ever happened, which is what you get in Islam. He says all the qira'at were agreed upon. Again, not at the time of early Islam. Not during the early Islamic period. They were not all agreed upon. There were ones that were agreed as part of the initial 7 as established by Ibn Mujahid in the 10th century that were not actually agreed upon by everyone. There are people that argued with him and said, why are you including that one? Why are you not including these? Why have you picked just 7? So no, to pretend that the ulama were just in complete agreements is a lie, and he should know this, especially given that he likes to give dawah. You should know this, bro. You will never find Muslims disagreeing with the authenticity of their scripture, apart from the very early Muslims who were some of the master reciters of the Quran according to Hadith, who actually had their own codices with a different number of surahs in them. For example, Ubay ibn Ka'b, he had his own codex that had 116 surahs, and those 2 extra surahs were being recited in prayer at the mosque. Abdullah ibn Masud, however, did not have 116 surahs. Nor did he have the standardized 114 surahs you have today. He had 111 surahs because he thought that 3 of the surahs that you have in your Quran today, the last 2, 114, 113, and Surah Al-Fatiha, were dua and were not supposed to actually be in the Quran. They were not recitation of the Quran. And this is all in your own history and is acknowledged by scholars. And that's ignoring all the qira'at that people seemingly from a very early point in time started arguing over very quickly and had a plethora of different opinions. The Uthmanic Codex in and of itself has variants. Scholars have long known, and again, the Muslim ulama, the scholars at that time, they were writing saying, hey, we have the Uthmanic Codex that says this at this ayah. We're aware that in a different region, say Medina or Kufa or Damascus, they have a different Uthmanic Codex that has a different reading, which means there were differences in the razm of the Uthmanic Codex. Whoops. What do you call it when someone tries to standardize multiple different modes of a text into one text, but then he actually makes mistakes and puts variants in his own text, and then he sends out multiple copies to different regions of the Islamic Empire that all say slightly different things? I would call that, are you ready for this? Not perfectly preserved. I mean, that's not perfect, right? Like, how are you going to argue that that's perfect? Anyway, let's continue.
It's a complete, only a babbling buffoon would even consider this to be a good argument. Only a complete ignoramus. An ignoramus, either a complete ignoramus or how do I say this? I mean, look, for lack of a better word, a very deceitful person, right? A very deceptive person you either have to be extremely ignorant or extremely deceptive to use this as an argument. Honestly, I don't know which one fits Chris better. Honestly, could it be both? I don't know, man.
And we're back to the name calling, which is really the only real thing you have left because we've been demolishing your religion for a while now, and there isn't really anything left to stand on. You claim that the Quran is perfectly preserved, and yet when basic stuff comes out, like Uthman's Codex was originally compiled and sent out to different regions with variations in it, in the razm, you still think it's perfectly preserved. You then say that, the Qira'at, we've always agreed on this. No, you haven't always agreed on this ever. And it's disingenuous of you to try and appeal to that because you know full well, if you've studied this, that the Qira'at was in doubt immediately from the very get-go. It actually becomes more streamlined into just 7, then 10, then 14, different versions over time by the 10th century, and then for 14 by the 15th century. By the 15th century, you guys finally realize there are 10 different recitations of the Quran. The 15th century. And you think that's perfect. You think that's perfectly preserved. You've eliminated a plethora of different Qira'at. You accept that the Aruf, no one knows what it is. DawahOverDunya, you have no idea what the Aruf is. You can't tell me exactly what the variants are and the different ways of reciting for each ayah or for each surah. You can't tell me that. You don't even know what it is. We know that Ubay ibn Ka'b and Abdullah ibn Masud, 2 of the master reciters of the Quran, according to Sahih Hadith, disagreed with the Uthmanic Codex because they disagreed with the fact that it was 114 surahs. I'm just going to add this because I know what he's going to come back with. But eventually there was ijma, there was consensus eventually. I don't care if eventually there was consensus. Like, that doesn't change anything. Like, how foolish can you be if you think that because people eventually agree on things, that means there was never any disagreement? That is the biggest lie and the biggest attempt at reframing history to suit your own narrative. Why don't you just accept that the best reciters of the Quran disagreed about what the Quran was? Why don't you just accept that? I know why you can't accept that, because you would have to admit to Muslims that you've been lying to them for a long time now, and that's very difficult. Fortunately, I'll tell them honestly. I want people to know the truth, and I don't want people to be deceived by false teachers who claim to spread information when they know it's false. Let's keep watching.
So if you want to read up about this, you can get a book called The 10 Qira'at of the Noble Quran by Dr. Fidel Suleiman, who worked for the Bridges Foundation in Cairo, which is a Dawah Institute. And he's wrote a book about it.
Yeah, it's a book, Chris, that, look, I haven't read, but I am 100% certain you did not read. I am 100% certain you did not read. Because if you read even a tenth of that book, you would not be making the statements that you're about to make. Watch, we're gonna keep watching the video. But one, you would not be conflating versions of the Bible, or trying to compare, I should say, versions of the Bible with the Qira'at. If you knew anything about the Qira'at, or if you, how do I say this, had an ounce of sincerity, I should say, because maybe you know and just don't care and are just hiding the truth, or it's intentionally just twisting the truth. Either way, it's bad for you. But regardless, I'm just gonna. But you know what? Honestly, I'm not even gonna. Allah knows best, right? I don't know if. I'll be honest with you. I don't know. I genuinely don't know if he's doing this out of just plain ignorance, or if he's doing this out of deception. Really, it's really, really hard to determine. But anyway, I know for a fact, Chris, you have not even touched a book on this topic.
Once again, he seems to know more about me than I do. This guy, who has never met me, ever, thinks he knows what I have read and what I have not read. I think this guy is quite honestly never bothered to look into the arguments that I make and to respond to them generally. He's just jumping on this one video, presumably again, because the Ummah wants them to reply because they're getting all worried that the Quran isn't actually perfectly preserved. They're getting worried and they're catching on to the fact they might have been lied to by a lot of Muslims. DawahOverDunya. The British translation of the 10 Qur'at of the Noble Quran is a Quran. It's a translation of the Quran, to be more precise. I've read the Quran. I read this book specifically to find out where there are any places where the text is highlighted in red. And I do this because it actually shows variance. That's what it means. And there are tons of them. Absolutely tons of them. You can't go through, for example, Surah Al-Baqarah without seeing a ton of variance. And in the footnotes, it explains to you what the variants are in the different readings of the Qur'an. And I can point to you just a few off the top of my head. So Surah Al-Yunus, Surah 10, Ayah 16 has a variant where it's a negation, so it's a contradiction. Surah 17, 102 changes who is speaking, and it's in the context of a historical event, so again, a contradiction. Surah 11, 81 has a variant in it where it changes whether or not someone stayed behind or someone went with them in the context of Lot's wife. Again, a contradiction because it's a historical account. We can keep going on and on with these. And the reason I know these is I spend time studying and I go through pieces of work and I look at what people are saying and I make notes of it to figure out whether or not people are lying to me. In this case, yes, people were lying to me. People were trying to tell me the Quran is perfectly preserved. And then I read a book. And then I realized it's not perfectly preserved. This is just something that Muslims come up with because it sounds good. Most people, when they think perfectly preserved, they would think a single text or a single oral tradition with no alterations that has been faithfully passed down and is not disagreed upon by anyone. That's what they would think perfect means. None of that fits Islam. The early scholars, the Sahaba of Islam, disagreed with this. They said it was different. The early Imams disagreed with this because they all had a different Qur'an, which they all had different things in it. So they disagreed with it. The Aruf is lost. We don't know what it is. Great stuff, guys. You guys don't even know if the Bismillah is supposed to be a verse in the Quran or not. You guys don't even know what the mysterious letters mean. Like, we could go into tons of things, but there is a ton of information that is lost. And so, no, the Quran is not perfectly preserved. Very simple. There is a room inside your head, DawahOverDunya, where you can find me relaxing because I live there rent-free. You know, I think it is starting to affect me, the fact that, I just haven't read any books. I think it's really starting to affect my ministry. I mean, when I actually do find some books, it'll be really good if I could get them. And then after I've got them, start to read them and learn all about different aspects of Islam. Maybe from, from a historical perspective, maybe from a critical scholarly perspective. Maybe I could read a broad range of different things from different topics. I'm not sure. I mean, it seems like a good place to start. I mean, maybe even some modern scholars as well. Modern scholars who are fairly mainstream. Maybe some people who did some stuff on the early traditions. I mean, that would be pretty interesting. But then again, I guess I'd be pretty ignorant if I didn't read any tafsirs. I mean, I've always wanted to read some tafsir al-Qurtubi, but the problem is that he just keeps writing things in different volumes, and there's tons and tons of these volumes. I mean, Aisha Bewley, I think I just called Aisha Bewley a he. Sorry, didn't mean to do that. She's translating the Arabic from all these Muslims. And of course, it would be ignorant if I didn't read the Quran. Gosh. Or the most trusted set of hadith, I mean, gosh, who would I be if I didn't actually bother reading that? And of course, something to tell me where all the manuscript variants are. Of course, there aren't any of those. And, just basics into Aruf and Harf, according to Dr. Yasser Qadi in his book, The Introductions to the Sciences of the Quran. Yeah, I mean, it's a shame I just haven't read any books. Oh, wait. Yes, I have. I totally forgot I have read lots of books. Oh, damn. I gotta put all these back. Okay, give me 1 minute. But again, I'm sure DawahOverDunya knows my life better than I do. But anyway, let's continue.
Translates the Quran into English, but not just in one reading. He does it for all 10. So you can read the differences in the Quran for all different 10 valid readings according to Islamic scholars.
Great.
Cool. So do you accept then?
Notice how he says, valid readings. All 10 valid readings. They're all valid. They're all from God. We believe they're all from God. They're all read by the same skeletal text. They can all be read using the same skeletal text. Right? We have one skeletal text that can be recited in many different ways. Again, you'd know this really, really basic stuff if you had actually read a book or two on this topic. By the way, I'm not like sitting here saying like I'm like an expert in this topic or that I've done extensive research in this topic, but I know the basics. Like, I mean, the kindergarten level basics, guys. right? Like, I'm not a mathematician, but I know my times tables. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the level of an ignoramus we're dealing with here. Like, I'm not a mathematician. I'm definitely not a mathematician. I'm not the best at math. I mean, I'm an engineering student, but, well, regardless, I'm not a mathematician, nowhere close to that. But I'll tell you what, I know my times tables fairly well. I know how to multiply and divide. That's the level of, that's the scale we're dealing with here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it doesn't take a genius to figure this out. The reason I say the term valid is because that's what you believe. It's not what I believe. The reason I say valid is because I'm talking from your perspective. Your scholars say the 10 Qur'an are valid. I don't think they are, in the sense of I don't think they go back to Muhammad. Okay, DawahOverDunya, let's keep it basic, right? Here we go. There is nothing in your Sunnah or your Quran that tells you that the Quran is recited in 10 recitations, 10 qira'at. Point one. Point number two, the qira'at were debated intensely for the first few hundred years of Islam. They were only standardized into 7 by Ibn Mujahid in the 10th century. So that's 300 years already. And there were many more than 7 before that. Ibn Mujahid was just trying to get it down to 7. Does that sound like it's perfect if all these imams who are leading prayer with different recitations? You know what? I think that might be problematic in your faith. I don't know though. Maybe I haven't read a book, so. I mean, just think of it reasonably. How can you even say there's perfect preservation if you don't know what the mysterious letters are? If you don't know the meaning behind them, then the full meaning of the Quran is not revealed to you. Or they are meaningless. And if they are meaningless, then the Quran is not an amazing text or an amazing recitation because it contains nonsense. And it is better to be free of nonsense than to contain it. I mean, these are really basic points.
So you claim that there's a book written by an Islamic scholar, or I don't know if it was an Islamic scholar or not, but how on earth does there being more than one qira'ah prove the Quran is not perfectly preserved? I don't see the point. I don't see his argument. The Quran has multiple qira'ah. Guys, this is essentially his argument. He asked Sneako, you believe the Quran is preserved? Yes. Oh yeah? There's qira'at.
I want you guys to notice as well, he actually starts off by correctly summarizing my position. He says that because this qira'at, this is evidence that the Quran is not perfectly preserved. Correct. But you'll notice that as the review goes on, he realizes that that's actually kind of reasonable. So he twists it and he stops saying the word perfect. It just says preserved. This is a common trick that people do. When Muslims rushed to try and defend Sneako, they basically took my argument and they manipulated it slightly by leaving out that word perfect. They want me to say the Quran has not been preserved in any sense. So that's what they want me to say, because then they can have some arguments against that.
You can ask Muhammad Hijab, he has the same view.
Because the question is, which one is divinely revealed?
Hold on. Did he just say Muhammad Hijab holds that view? Hold on, wait, let me go back. Maybe I misheard him. Did you guys hear that? I think he just said Muhammad Hijab holds that same view, i.e. the view that the Qur'an disprove the reliability of the Qur'an. Hold on, let me just, 1 second. Look, maybe I misheard him. Don't. He did. He said Muhammad Hijab. You think Muhammad Hijab believes that, oh, yeah, man, Shan Allah, wallahi, kadhab. You think Muhammad Hijab believes that the qira'at disprove the reliability of the Quran? Are you brain dead?
And that is bringing Muhammad Hijab into this is to try to sort of like refer to someone who's an authority somehow to help his case. I mean, this is terrible. So I don't know if he's aware of this, but I debated Muhammad Hijab, and I debated with Muhammad Hijab regarding the idea that the Quran is perfectly preserved. He wasn't able to give me a definition of the word preserved, because every time I pushed him for one, he panicked and made racial claims about white people. Some people might even say that was pretty racist of him. But nonetheless, he did confirm that in terms of the Aruf, his opinion is that not all of the Aruf are around today, and that some of that Aruf has been lost. But this is okay, in the way he explained it, is because if you have a legal ruling, it's sufficient for the Ummah to follow that single legal ruling, even if there were potentially other legal rulings that could have been around in other Aruf. So, in effect, Muhammad is saying, yes, it's likely we don't have all of the 7 Aruf today, but we have at least some, and that's sufficient enough to act out according to our faith, and therefore it isn't an issue. This, to me, is conceding the point, because if you admit that the 7 Aruf are not around today, then you have lost a significant portion of your Quran. And hence, here we go, it is not perfectly preserved. Oh, there's also a video where Muhammad Hijab defends against a Quran-only Muslim, where he points out that there are variants in the Quran, and the only way that you can reconcile these is with the hadith material that talks about the 7 Aruf. So yes, he acknowledges that there are differences in words, and they do mean different things, and hence they're, in my term, I would just say that means there's different Qurans, but I'm sure he has his own way of thinking of that. It's not 10 Qurans, it's 1 Quran, but they're all recited differently with different words that mean different things. Interesting. Notice again, he's now switched back to, instead of addressing my point against perfect preservation, he's now just going against some general sense of preservation. It's a weaker argument, so he wants to address that one. He doesn't want to address my one. My one makes him cry at night, but this one that he's addressing is a lot easier for him. It's much more lower level, and it's something he can comprehend and address. I would like for him to get on my level and to address the idea that the Quran is not perfectly preserved.
Uthman did not canonize the Qur'an. You can't canonize the Qur'an because the Qur'an is not many books. It's one book. You can't canonize the Qur'an. That makes absolutely no sense. He did not canonize the Qur'an. He did not decide upon how many chapters in the Qur'an. The Uthman had the Qur'an memorized. The companions had the Qur'an memorized. The issue of canon has never been an issue.
The issue of canon has never been an issue. In the 15th century, Al-Jazari standardized the official allowed recitations of the Quran, the Qur'an, from 7. He expanded them to 10. In the 15th century.
This is so much, man. It's getting overwhelming. I almost feel sorry for him. Look, very simple. Just stay in your lane, Chris. Just stay in your lane. Okay? All right?
Stay in my lane. This is how you know a person gets desperate, ladies and gentlemen. Stay in your lane. I'm going to be honest, bro. I'm coming for you. I'm coming for the Quran. If you would like to debate on this, I would love to do that. Let's debate and let's talk about this topic. And let's see whether or not you are able to defend the Quran or if you will crumble at the first hurdle. Bro, you will fail immediately and you know it, which is why you're never going to accept this. Get a third party to debate if you want. Doesn't matter. I'll destroy everything you have to say on this. If you can't sleep tonight, wake up and organize a debate. I'll be here and I'll be waiting. But my lane is on a one-way track to destroying perfect preservation of your Quran. And you know it and you are terrified. He's trying to say that the companions all agreed on this from the very beginning and that's how we know it's trustworthy. No, they all disagreed at the beginning. That's the problem. That's why you had to have a canonization process so early on. It's because there wasn't consensus. It had to be forced. It had to be shoved down people's throats, except the Quran is 114 surahs. It's not 116 like Ubay ibn Ka'b says. It's not 111 like Abdullah ibn Masud says. It has to be like this. And this is embarrassing for you because it means it isn't perfectly preserved. And then just the cherry on the cake. The cherry on the cake. Uthman couldn't even write copies of his own Quran codex without making mistakes in it. Think about that. Like, genuinely think. Imagine, right, you are doing a monumental task. You have an entire committee of scribes at your use, and you're spending time writing this Quran. It is the holy script. You want to make sure there's no mistakes at all, and you make mistakes. And the early ulama are like, Uthman, you in one part you did this, but in another part you did this. Pretty sure that was a mistake, right? But you can't say that in Islam because that's not allowed. So you have to reinterpret what he was doing. Uthman was being very clever, being really super clever. He had this plan, right? He was going to preserve all the aruf in these little mistakes. And they're so tiny, it's funny. It's like Muslims will point out, yeah, there were mistakes, but they were tiny. Yeah, but that's how we know they're mistakes. But they'll try and interpret it as, oh, but these are intentional because this is how he preserves the aruf. Aha, you see, you were expecting that one. Uthman in his codex preserved the 7 aruf by putting these tiny variants in. Totally not mistakes, even though they're incredibly tiny and pretty much make no real difference to the meaning of the text. That's how the aruf comes in. But if you do that, you know basically a bit the aruf is pointless and doesn't help anyone.
There's nothing wrong with that. Alhamdulillah. And I mentioned this in one of my TikToks, one of my YouTube shorts, right? This is a proof of the Qur'an's authenticity. This proves the Qur'an's authenticity. The companions themselves from the get-go were in charge and responsible of maintaining that the Quranic message was clear and that there was no confusion amongst the people, right? To ensure that the Muslim Ummah would not get confused.
Okay, so the Quran was revealed in 7 different aruf, 7 different modes to make it easier for people to learn. Okay, that's interesting. But then this confused people like 20 years after Muhammad died, to the extent that Uthman, the caliph, decided he would take all these aruf and destroy them and keep only one. I'm sorry, did Uthman just override Muhammad there? Can you give me a single narration where it's Muhammad saying, guys, you know I revealed the Quran in 7 different ways, but it was a big mistake. It turns out this is just going to really confuse people. So I'm actually going to let Uthman, 20 years after I die, roughly, I'm going to let him destroy all these aruf, pick one, and then just write his Musaf in one. Think about what that means. It means that Muhammad was one of the most ignorant people in the world, that he didn't understand that making these supposedly like largely irrelevant variants, taking these different aruf, these different modes of reciting, getting 7 of them to help people, not knowing he's going to confuse everyone, within a matter of 20 years after his passing. That is incredibly insulting to Muhammad. In fact, another caliph has to come in, according to this view that DawahOverDunya is talking about. He has to correct Muhammad because Muhammad got it wrong. Uthman, the third caliph, got it right. He knew that this was confusing, so he standardized it into just one aruf.
During the process of the time of Uthman, in fact, you can, I mean, I read about this. See, Chris, I actually did read about this in detail. This is the best book I would recommend people read.
It's a book. Oof.
Again, if you knew what the qira'at and what the ahruf actually were, you wouldn't, and what the difference was, you would not be asking that, right? You would know, if you knew the definition of what the qira'at were, you would not be asking, hey, where are the ahruf? The ahruf are contained within the qira'at, you babbling buffoon.
And this is basically his last argument. This is the last defense they have. And it's beautiful, man. I love it. It's really good. It makes it so easy for me. The qira'at are just different collections, different combinations of the different aruf. So you may find one qira'at takes from 3 particular aruf, another qira'at maybe 2, maybe 4, and so on and so forth. And that's how you get the different qira'at. And this is kind of how they also defend against the fact that there's tons of these different qira'at. First of all, this is speculation. There's no evidence for this at all. It's an evidenceless idea. There's nothing in the Qur'an that tells them this. There's nothing in the Sunnah that tells them this. I mean, the Sunnah doesn't, as far as I'm aware, doesn't even mention the qira'at, so okay. It's held by blind faith that these arufs survive somehow. They go through Uthmanic's recension and then they live in a way that isn't understood or known, but no one knows what the aruf are. This is the problem. And if he was being honest, he wouldn't be able to tell you what the aruf are, and therefore he can't tell you what qira'at has which aruf, because he has no idea. He doesn't know what the aruf are. Here's a challenge to DawahOverDunya to see if he is a sincere person. Tell me which aruf are contained within each qira'at. Pick the 7 or 10, the 7 for Mimba Mujahid or the 10 for Majazri, I don't mind. And then tell me exactly which aruf is preserved in each qira'at. Are you watching, Muslims? Are you watching? Let's see if you can meet this challenge. I know he can't because no one knows what the aruf is. So how can Muslims like DawahOverDunya tell you confidently that this is the truth? That different qira'at simply are just different collections of different aruf? They can't. They are lying to your face. They are saying it in a very confident voice, but when you ask them questions about it, they can't tell you. So again, how do you know the aruf have been perfectly preserved if A, you've forgotten what they are, 2, you don't know which qira'at supposedly even contains which aruf, no one knows. 3, you have no idea if all of the aruf has been preserved in all the qira'at. Again, you're taking that purely based on faith. 4, this is obviously bid'ah and complete innovation because there is nowhere in the Qur'an or Sunnah where this is told to you. You're just making it up as you go along because the wall is coming down and people like me are having a very fun time living in your head rent-free. Let's watch DawahOverDunya's completely calm, rational, and not erratic and unhinged response.
You don't know jack squat about this topic. You've never even touched a book on this topic. You've never done an ounce of research on this topic, objective research, right? I'm sure you've Googled Jay Smith's page or, I'm sure you've watched the other videos on this YouTube channel, on the Soko's YouTube channel. I'm sure you did that. Yeah, I can imagine that, right? But you never did any actual legitimate research. We all know you didn't. We all know that. All right?
Are the aruf in existence today? A very crucial question that arises is whether the 7 aruf are still present today. Good question. Of course, this question in essence depends upon how one defines the aruf. For example, Az-Zarqani strongly argues that all the aruf have been preserved, but this goes back to his definition that the aruf represents 7 ways that the verse can be changed. Thus, since these variations are still present in today's qira'at, he argues that all 7 aruf have been preserved. This is basically DawahOverDunya's argument. The present discussion will, of course, utilize the definition that was concluded upon in the previous section. The scholars of Islam are divided into 3 opinions with regards to this issue. Oh, they're divided. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, really interesting. I thought there was only one opinion that DawahOverDunya was certain of. Looks like he wasn't. Who would have thought that?
I think they are.
I think they were destroyed. I think that 6 out of 7 valid readings for your Quran are destroyed and they're not preserved.
They are within all the recitation we have today.
6 out of 7 is a majority. It's a vast majority.
Who do you think destroyed them?
This is my good friend.
See, that's a complete. Oh my God! You see what I'm saying? If you knew what the qira'at were, you wouldn't be saying that. If you knew what the qira'at were, you would not be saying that, right? The qira'at, because the qira'at are combinations of the ahruf, you would not be. If you knew that, you wouldn't be saying what you're saying. It makes no sense to be saying, "Hey, all the ahruf were destroyed but one." Except the problem is the qira'at we have today are compilations of all of the ahruf, not just one, right? The very fact that we would not even be able to have more than one qira'ah of the Qur'an today if only one harf had survived, right? It would literally be physically and intellectually impossible for us to have more than one qira'ah of the Quran if only one harf had made it through, had survived.
The first group of scholars, composed of Al-Tabari, At-Tahawi, Ibn Hibban, and those who follow them, argue that only one half is in existence today. Al-Tabari holds that the recitation of the Quran in 7 Aruf was a concession given to the companions at the time of the Prophet, but when Uthman officially compiled the Quran, he did compile the Quran, according to this guy, he specifically ordered the committee assigned to write the Musaf to preserve only one half. Ooh. So it looks like there isn't any agreement on this, and there are scholars that think there is only one half, and there are scholars that think there are more than one, and there are scholars that think that all 7 are preserved through the power of magic and will. Whoops. But remember, guys, if I Google Qira'at, I wouldn't be saying this, because how can you think that there is one half, only one of the Aruf has survived, and yet there's 10 different Qira'at? Gosh, you would have to be an ignoramus to think that, right, DawahOverDunya? Just like all of your scholars?
How on earth could you have, if you knew what qira'at were, you wouldn't be saying this. If you knew that the qira'at were combinations of more than one harf, you would not then be making the idiotic statement that only one harf exists. Because by definition, you need more than one to have combinations. You need more than one harf to have combinations of a harf.
Approximately a third of which believe that, yes, actually there is only one half.
It's called math. You know what I'm saying?
So awkward. DawahOverDunya has just mocked and ridiculed the ulama because he's ignorant of what they actually believe. I love it. I love it. This is amazing. It's like watching a Muslim destroy Islam from within because they don't know what their own scholars say. This is brilliant. Keep doing this, man. You have my full support. It's an idiotic statement, guys. Complete idiot. These idiot scholars that say that only one half exists, the other 6 of the 7 Aruf have gone. Idiots. Ugh. The disgust and the disdain that DawahOverDunya has for his own scholars. It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Yeah, Islamic scholars, it's called math, and DawahOverDunya knows math.
It's called math. You know what I'm saying?
So get in line, guys. Stop with this idiotic statement that there's only one half. There's evidently all of them, because I know, because I'm DawahOverDunya. As for what is meant by the 7 Aruf, there is a great deal of difference on this issue. Ibn Qutaybah recorded 35 opinions on this issue. 35 different views, wow, on what the Aruf are. And As-Suyuti listed over 40. Ibn Sadan, a famous grammarian and reciter of the Quran, even declared that the true meaning of the Aruf was known only to Allah, and thus to attempt to investigate into this issue was futile. But DawahOverDunya knows best, right? These classical scholars, man, they're terrible. DawahOverDunya, he's where it's at. On the other hand, Ibn Muhammad ibn al-Jazari, the person who expanded the Quran into 10 different viable readings from 7, perhaps the greatest scholar of the Qira'at, big appraisal there, said, I have sought to discover the meanings of these hadith about the Aruf, and have pondered over them, and contemplated this topic for over 30 years, until Allah opened my mind to that which is the correct answer in this matter. Inshallah, only Allah knows. The reason that such a great difference of opinion exists concerning the exact meaning of the Aruf is due to the fact that there does not exist in any explicit narration from the Prophet or the Salaf concerning the exact nature of the Aruf. Oh. Therefore, it should be understood from the outset that to arrive at any one specific conclusion and claim with certainty that it alone is correct and all else is wrong is purely folly. Let's keep reading this mysterious device I hold in my hands. Dr. Yasir Qadhi then quotes Ibn al-Jazari when he says, the majority of the scholars of the Salaf and the later generations are of the opinion that the Uthmanic Musaf contains of the 7 Aruf only that which its script allows. The majority opinion, according to al-Jazari, the 15th century scholar who was an expert on the Qur'an, is that only the Aruf which could potentially have survived the Uthmanic recension did. Which means, drumroll please, not all of the Quran has been preserved, because some of the Aruf has been lost, and the Aruf did indeed include differences in recitation. This has probably been a long video. I'm going to have to edit a lot of this, just because it was so fun just going through the stuff he says, and his absolute anger and fury at me is amazing. But of course, I hold no ill will to him. As a Christian, I'm called to love him, call him to our Lord Jesus Christ, because that is the way, the truth, and the life. Islam is inherently false, Islam tells you things that are just lies, and it lies to your face, like the idea that the Quran is perfectly preserved, like the idea that the Quran has scientific miracles in it, or like the idea that the Quran is like the best literary work in Arabic that has ever existed. These kind of lies. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're not a Christian yet, now's the time to become one. My email is chris@speakerscorner@gmail.com. If you have any questions regarding the faith or about this particular topic in this video, God bless you all. I hope you have a great day, and that includes you, DawahOverDunya. Sleep well. Take care.
And Islam is finished.